Welcome to Inside Covington, a podcast providing inside knowledge about the key players in helping Northern Kentucky's largest city grow. That, of course, is Covington, Kentucky. I'm your host, Pat Frew, Executive Director of the Covington Business Council. This podcast is targeted for engaged business and civic leaders locally, and we're grateful for our collaborative partner and producer, the Telecommunications Board of Northern Kentucky. Today on the program, I'm joined on Inside Covington by Terry Dean of Sales Marketing. And Terry, thanks for being on the program.
My pleasure to be here, Pat.
Terry will probably get into this a little more later, but I'm intimidated today, folks, because I have another former radio person with me on the podcast. But Terry, tell me a little bit about your business, Dean of Sales, and what you do with all the different products. There's whiteboard animation, and then you've got a new product that you're testing the market on. So tell us a little bit about the work and how you came to develop it.
Pat, my career has been in radio. I was in radio for over 40 years. I worked here in Cincinnati, in the Northeast, the Northwest. And along the way, I bought a company that produced short-form audio vignettes. One of the ones that has been very successful through the years is called Holiday Traditions. It's a 30-second audio vignette that tells the different customs that we have at Christmas. And radio stations would buy this and then use it to resell to advertisers. The sponsor would put their message in the various vignettes. And we have sold hundreds and hundreds of those around the country. But then a couple years ago, I discovered whiteboard explainer animations, and I was intrigued with it because, whiteboard animation is not about the video, it's more about the audio that gets accentuated with the animation that goes along with it, the sketches on the whiteboard background, the animated background. And so I started producing those about 5 years ago, so in addition to the audio, that I still continue to sell around the country, I now produce the whiteboard explainer animations, which are generally about 90 seconds in length, although I have a new product I've created now called Branding Bites. They're 30-second animations where an advertiser can insert their logo and a message, and it's various topics. One of the ones I'm working on right now is called Why Do We Say That? In fact, let's go ahead and we're going to play one right now, hear what it sounds like.
If you're not a starter in sports, you're probably second string. Why do we say that? I'll tell you right after this. Why do we say that someone is on the second string? While we think of second string as a sports expression, it actually comes from times when battles were fought with bows and arrows. If you were an archer in battle, you wouldn't be much use if the string on your bow broke. So for backup, an archer would always have a second string. So now you know, if you're a backup player, you'll know why we say you're second string.
So that's what we have going, and I'm interested to see where it goes. The applications are multiple, and that it could be used for social media. But one of the things I think is kind of interesting about it is that for salespeople, it's an opportunity to send to contacts that they may want to try to warm up the relationship with, or to send to their overall contact list just to stay in touch. Because, when you got a lot of members or accounts or anything of that nature, it's hard to reach people all the time. And it's nice to reach out on a non-transactional basis just to say hi.
Right. Let's get a little, I think we ought to go back a little bit into your radio career. And, we were joking before we came on about the Herb Tarlick tarnished reputation of radio salespeople. And you impressed me because you talked about your approach to companies. You were always looking to really understand the inside dynamics of a company, and you were willing to actually give them kind of a free version of what their commercial would sound like. And you have, as we say, great pipes in the business, but much of your career was behind the scene in sales. It was not on air, but you obviously have the voice to be able to create a great product. Talk a little bit about that and how you tried to approach your craft differently in a more authentic and integrous way, in dealing with customers and potential customers.
Well, you'll appreciate this, that when I was at WVXU, when it was broadcasting from the basement of a building on the campus at 10 watts, I wanted to go into news, much like you did.
Right.
I actually started working at a little station out in Milford. It was called WLYK at the time, and there really wasn't a need for a news department at a station that little. But I did like doing the production work. But I looked out in the parking lot and I saw which cars people were driving, and I saw the sales and management were driving all the new ones. They had the new Cordobas. So I went in that direction, but I approached it. I was a bit of a unicorn because I really was a creative, and I loved the production process. And I also was very good at creating campaigns. And so I developed sales skills that allow me the opportunity to actually take the product I would produce and sell that to the prospects and the accounts, which made me different because a lot of people in my industry, in the industry of broadcasting, they will sell the time and the space that's available on the radio stations or TV stations. I'd actually sell the concept that would go in the space. And it really put me in a unique position for developing business because much like an ad agency, when you have that relationship where you're dealing with the creative, it puts you at a different level than when you're just talking about the process of selling the space and time.
Right. So you were basically creating an experience, and you were creating a campaign versus just a one-off, we have 30 seconds to tell your story, but you really tried to understand more of what these organizations were trying to market and to sell, and you really put a lot of extra thought and time into it.
Yeah, I became an expert on everything up to 60 seconds. I enjoyed it. I liked really understanding what people's businesses were and to find that unique selling position, and then together work on a position that could be part of a commercial, and it became very collaborative. It also changed my relationship because with media, it can come and go. Ratings are a very volatile item to be working with, and if you put all your stock into how well the station is performing, it makes you very vulnerable. I want to be somebody that was able to invest in the concept itself, and then we could determine the way it could be best used.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. How long have you been a CBC member, and why did you join the council?
It's probably been about 6 years. And I joined when I came back to Cincinnati. I had been in Portland, Oregon for about 15 years. And I came back to town and I had completed what I was doing in radio. And I wanted to put more time back into the Dean of Sales Marketing. And a station here that I had been working with locally, they were members of CBC. And they suggested I go to a meeting just to get reconnected. And at the time, I had been doing the whiteboards for radio stations around the country who had also been buying my audio vignettes. But I mentioned it to somebody at a CBC meeting, and they got very interested, and I produced one for them. And since then, I've produced over 100 as a result of being a member of CBC.
Yeah, and Terry often plays them at our Wednesday morning Connects networking meetings, and I know a lot of folks have really received a lot of value from those, and it's a great way to explain to people in a concise way what they do and how they can be helpful, to you as a potential customer. Speaking of customers, in your line of work, how do you find them?
Well, a lot of different ways. You do spend time actually going through the traditional cold call process, although in today's world, that's a lot more difficult than when I started out. You could actually walk into a business, introduce yourself, and maybe meet the person running it. Those days are long gone, security and all the things that prevent you. But I have to say that networking, for what I'm doing right now, is by far and away number one. Networking and reputation, referrals.
How do you go about the referral process? Do you have a science to that in the same way that you did the commercials with people, or is it more straightforward?
Guarantee satisfaction. I had an animation I was working on in the last month or so. It was actually a CBC member. And when you're doing the animations, I have to take a creative leap of faith because you're not exactly sure what you're going to come up with is what somebody actually visualizes. And in most cases, I come close to getting it pretty much on target. But this one, I totally missed the mark. And I went in a direction that was inconsistent with what this person visualized it should be. We got all done. He was unhappy. and we scrapped it and started over. And I guarantee people, if you're not happy with what I produce for you, then we're either going to start it over or we're going to call it quits and walk away.
Yeah. Are there some more unusual businesses that you've helped that you, when you first got into whiteboard animation, you thought, never thought I'd do a whiteboard animation on this business? Or
Say like colonoscopy.
yeah.
The last line is, "It's all behind you now."
Oh, yeah. I think I saw an ad in the Super Bowl on that too. So, what is it about the branding bites? I know there's a little differentiation from what you were doing with the whiteboard animation, and I think it comes about with your attempts to be disarming to potential customers. It's not pestering marketing. It's just presenting an idea in a different kind of way.
One of the things that has been the formula in the vignettes I've sold over the years, and it's a formula that I actually bought because I bought this company. It had been around 20 years even before I bought it. All the vignettes used what I might call, if you're familiar with a newsman named Paul Harvey, you always have the rest of the story. And even in the evening news, they always tease you, right, with a headline to get you to stay listening or viewing. In this case, as you heard with that whiteboard animation where the opening line is second string. Why do we say that? Most of my vignettes I do all have something that grabs your attention, which I learned in radio. If you're going to get them to pay attention to your message, you got to get them to pay attention. And then it follows, in this case, is a brief 5-second announcement for the person that's the sponsor. So what it does is allows people to present a reminder of who they are in a non-aggressive way and not so highly informational. Everything you see on Facebook now is people are trying to push their information on you. We're getting numb. We're numb to that. So I'm trying to find a different way to kind of a back door to come in and say, hi, here's something you might find entertaining. And by the way, it was brought to you by. Yeah, it's no different than what Paycor does at the Bengals Stadium.
Right. If nothing else, you're creating a lot more interesting people at dinner parties. Did you know this is how this phrase went? And what?
Well, it gets a little old with my wife after a while. I mean, she's served more than she needs to.
Well, ever since you floated this concept to me, now I notice when I hear whatever they call them, idioms and stuff, and it's kind of crazy because we're kind of taught never to really talk that way. To talk, more straightforward instead of using these, ways of saying. But it is interesting. The more we practically have one of these things come in our vocabulary every day in one form or another. We either hear it somewhere or we say it before we even think about it. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, for instance, one of my idioms, why do we say that, says the cat's out of the bag. What a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah.
Right? Because you really have no idea why you said that. You know what you're referring to, that a secret's revealed, but that's actually an expression that came from the Middle Ages of people going to the market and getting a sack that was closed, and they get home, instead of a pig being in it, which they meant to purchase, a cat jumps out, right? So the cat's out of the bag. But I just always have been fascinated how we use these expressions and have really no idea why we're saying them.
Yeah, I was thinking of this yesterday. My daughter was making something, and she's really good at making things without a recipe. So making it from scratch, what does that mean? So I don't know if you run across that one yet, but that's another one for a future episode maybe.
It's amazing since I've started doing this how many I now have to work with.
Yeah. And radio has changed quite a bit over the years. I know when I was in it, I was in my early 30s when I got out of it, and it was one of the, there was the commercialization and the deregulation of radio and allowing people to buy, multiple stations all over. And, it's quite different today. And we're hearing a lot of this in television now with the bigger providers getting bought out and what that may mean. We may not have 4 network television stations in Cincinnati now. So, the industry has changed quite a bit, and you've been able to carve kind of a different niche out of this than your swan song in terms of the things that you're doing to keep yourself entertained and to help small businesses. So,
well, the creative is a constant. That doesn't change.
Yep.
How it's created changes, but still that drives a lot of reasons for people actually deciding on how they're going to market themselves. But as far as radio, I look at it. I went to a seminar years ago, and the professor was talking about, I think, a Harvard case study where they talked about if the airline or if the railroads, if the B&O railroads had realized they were in the transportation and not just the railroad business, you may have had B&O airlines. Well, railroad, or rather radio, really has recognized the same thing, that they weren't in the radio business, they were in the communication business. And with that, they used the platform of radio to develop all these other communication platforms, social media, internet, things of that nature. And so it's almost inevitable that it had to go that way. And as businesses in our country, big box, it kind of drives retail these days.
Right.
Big box, and now, of course, Amazon.
Yeah. Some people have talked about our economy being uncertain moving ahead. Do you see a decline or possibly an upswing in your business in 2026 as you look at kind of a new way to provide value to businesses? And I guess my other question, which I think you'll be answering already, is what are you doing to ensure continued growth? You're continuing to evolve and adapt.
Well, if the economy does not do well, there's going to be a need to develop new business for everybody. And I'm counting on my product aiding some people. It's not for everybody, but I think I'll find people out there that will find this a tool they can use to develop business. But I would say my impression of the economy right now is extremely uncertain. I feel a nervousness among people that they don't feel like they're getting the commitments this year that they've gotten in the past, and so they're very careful about what they're doing as far as the money they're spending. But we'll see how it works out. I think in a couple months we'll see which way things are going. But some things are good, but for a lot of people it's not, and it's changing. We're seeing it, and just like we saw the internet in the early '90s, you and I have been around long enough to see a lot of these cycles. They come, they go, but the world we know it's changing as it always has been.
Yeah. Terry, anything else in terms of all your work in Dean of Sales Marketing that we weren't able to cover? Any final thoughts before we conclude?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And as I said, I think there's people out there I might be able to help. And that's a big part of what drives me, too, is that, I spent my life in sales. I know the pain of developing business. And I always think about, how can I make this better? How can I make it easier? Maybe there's a better mousetrap. So we'll see.
Yeah. Another idiom. Do you have that? Do you have the definition of that one? Have you ever heard that one?
No, it sounds like something I'm going to have to research.
Well, that's the thing about you, Terry. You've always tried to be innovative and think about not only how to sell yourself to these businesses, but also to get a better understanding. Many of the businesses that are on the radio are in commodity type businesses, so it's very difficult to separate yourself from the other businesses. I almost said separate yourself from the pack. I'm trying to stay away from idioms now. And those,
you can't.
But yeah, that's the thing that's really important, that you not only look at, and I think, the negative perception of radio salespeople is, how can I sell this guy? How can I make money? How can I get the Cordoba or whatever the next thing is in the parking lot? But you focused on, how can I help them create something bigger that can go in different directions and be more than just a one-off type of promotion?
There was a writer, Og Mandino, that influenced me early on. There was a book called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And one of the points he made in it is to go out with love in your heart. And I generally try to find people that I can help. I would tell salespeople when I was a manager, I would say, look, to be successful, you only have to find 40 businesses in this city that happen to think you know what you're doing and that you can help. And there's a lot of businesses to draw from. So I think you can just focus on the ones that you can be helpful for.
Right. 40 doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're doing a great job and serving them the way you're talking about, those are going to be repeat customers. Those aren't going to be the one-offs.
Correct.
Great. Well, you've been listening to Inside Covington, a podcast for engaged business and civic leaders, helping them to meet the key players in Covington and Northern Kentucky. And it's been my pleasure to have Terry Dean of Sales Marketing. Terry, thank you for being on the program. Appreciate you doing it today.
Thank you, Pat.
So I'm your host, Pat Frew, Executive Director of the Covington Business Council. That's all the time we have for now. Catch you next time on Inside Covington.